Hello and welcome. My name is Myre, and today I wanted to try a new format where we take the SCL Q&A and maybe just boil it down into something a little bit more manageable while also talking about what's going on with it and what we can expect. Without further ado, let's go into it. So question 1 is addressing the elephant in the room, which is what happened to cargo? Where is it and why isn't it in 323 after showing us the ISCs and everything else regarding its development? So essentially, Chad said that this kind of came down at a head because essentially this was such a big change and such a big addition to the game that they weren't able to hit their targets. They said that they were really close, but the schedule simply slipped. They made references to the fact that the Hangar instancing and ASOP had stability problems that would make the entire game unplayable. And so because they didn't want a repeat of 318, which many devs have kind of gone on record as to saying was one of the worst builds of all time, and they are scarred by it, that they just didn't want to put it out, because if they did and it was buggy, then that wouldn't just break one gameplay loop, but stood to break all of them. Chad also blamed team restructuring and personnel changes within the group as to why this happened. Remember that Richard Tyrer last year moved from Squadron 42 back to Star Citizen and took a lot of his team with him in doing so to try and restructure, and I guess this kind of got in the way of this particular mechanic. Question 2 was, how do we prevent unwanted people from getting into our personal hangar? So Chad said that for this first iteration, what's going to happen is that if you are not inside that person's party, then when you walk inside their hangar, say if you follow them in their elevator or if you fly your ship inside an open hangar, then you'll get impounded if you're in a vehicle. If you're on foot, you'll get warped back to the ASOP terminal after a brief few seconds warning saying you're trespassing. Essentially, they said that because of armistice zones, you won't be able to draw weapons and stand your ground, but they won't also either. And this, I imagine, is just a way of keeping certain landing zones civil, because really, you don't necessarily want to have gunfights in places like the Lorville terminals or like Microtech. And instead, you would kind of think that perhaps maybe security would have a thing to do. So essentially, that's them doing that instead. In the future, perhaps with AI working and turrets and everything doing what they're supposed to be doing, we might have a more immersive system, but Chad mentioned that he wanted something a little bit more clean and simple for 332 that will just work and give us this feature. Chad also mentioned that once this feature is in and you go inside somebody else's hangar and you're trespassing and you try and steal something, when you get taken away by security or you get teleported by security, as the case may be, the item will still be on you, however, it's going to be marked as stolen. He didn't mention exactly what will happen with the stolen item and how you're going to be able to use it, but essentially, if you do have any items that are loose on the ground, say you have any guns or drinks and that kind of stuff, and somebody goes into your hangar and grabs it, there is a chance they can steal it, but then they'll have stolen property on them. Question 3 was, what is a group member's access like? So the answer to this, surprisingly for 332 when this comes out, is that all party members will have access to all other party members' hangars, even if they're not in the location. So that means that let's say that you have a friend who is in your party who has their home base set to R-Corp, Area 18, and, well, they're not there. Say they're in Microtech or maybe perhaps even in Pyro, you will still be able to go to their personal hangar if you are in their party. Apparently, what's going to happen is that there is no longer going to be a long list of all the different hangars from 1 to 13 or 20 or so. Instead, it'll just say Myre's hangar or your hangar and your party member's hangar as well. If you kick somebody from your party, it'll remove them from that list. You won't be able to go there anymore. And also what will happen is that if they're already in your hangar, they'll be removed and they will be impounded, much in the same way as mentioned before. Chad didn't mention how theft will work in this instance, however, it could stand to reason that if you take something from somebody's hangar, if you're in their party, that's going to be fine up until the point where you're kicked. From that point onwards, you'll have the warning, and if you take anything else, that stuff will be marked as stolen. So I'm jumping the gun here, but later on they do mention that even though you can go inside a party member's personal hangar when they're not there and use their freight elevator and kiosk, you will only be able to access your own inventory. Essentially, their understanding is that just being in somebody's party doesn't necessarily mean that that person can be trusted, and until they have a proper permission system in place, then having it in and having you be able to use and utilize somebody else's inventory like that could lead to disaster. Because imagine if people just start spamming party invites just so that they can maybe perhaps hop into somebody else's party, because in that case, then all of a sudden, if you accidentally even accept somebody else's party invite, then that person who's now in your party has access to all your stuff. So it's not quite ready for prime time. So question 4 goes, the size of the hangar you get is based on the size of your largest ship, but what happens if you purchase a larger ship? So Chad's answer to this is that if you're to buy a ship outside of the size class of your current ship, so if you have a prospector and you have a small hangar for that prospector and you buy a medium-sized ship or a large-sized ship, that new ship will be spawned inside a public hangar, which has all the same access that your private one does to your personal inventory and everything else that's connected to your freight elevator. The main difference here is that if you leave that zone, so let's say that you spawned your ship in a public hangar in Area 18 and you leave the zone with that ship, for instance, anything left inside that public hangar will be forfeit and wiped. When you come back, you'll be given a new public hangar, but obviously the floor space is going to be completely clean. So there's a reason for this. Essentially, they don't ever actually want you to be able to grow your hangar per se. Instead, they have a pipeline in mind where as you get more UEC, more money, and more influence, over time, you'll be able to actually purchase and rent and have more and more hangars for your character. There was no mention about being able to reset your account in order to give yourself a bigger hangar if you pledged for a new hangar, but I think that's intentional because generally speaking, they don't like to advertise this. So question 5 was, will players be able to access their own stuff in your hangar? So the answer is yes. You'll be able to access all your items and your item bank from a friend's personal hangar. Essentially meaning that if you have a bunch of, say, boxes and you have some cargo, you'll be able to load their ship really fast. And in the future, when vehicles are ready to be done in the same way, you'll be able to pull up your vehicles into their ship as well. However, in this first iteration, you will not be able to pull things from your party members' inventory, and that's because the team rightfully had a whole bunch of security concerns, because what happens if somebody just sends a whole battery of party invites to random people and all of a sudden he has access to your stuff. So until they have proper UI for security and permissions, they're going to hold off on this one. Question 6 was, how many home hangars can I have? And can I change them? So for this first release, you're only going to have the one hangar. However, they're thinking about giving you options to move them in the future. Essentially, they kind of want the players to have consequences for choosing the locations that their home base is going to be. The issue here for me is the fact that if you're a brand new player, you're not necessarily going to know exactly what consequences there are. It's going to be more a matter of learning further down the line. So being able to move your hangar and move your home base at least once or twice is kind of necessary. Question 7 was, is there a choice of other personal homes apart from cities? So this was an interesting answer. So apparently anywhere that has a hangar, so be it a rest stop or Grimhex, will be able to be used as a personal home down the line. Back to consequences, they want choosing your home to be a very important decision, and they want things like dynamic economy and things to also be a consideration for where you have your home. Essentially, if you have your home deep in the sticks, then you may not necessarily be able to have access to certain things, and also if you have your home in a major city, sure, you can load up there, but if you have missions and things that are relevant to your character and your playstyle really far away, then all of a sudden you have to make sure that you always have things ready for you to go. Chad did make a mention, however, that even though they want considerations to be key here and they want you to think about what you're doing, they don't want things to be too hardcore. And they made mention here to a game called Escape from Tarkov as the hardcore version, essentially. They want things to be as close to realistic and as close to a sim as possible, while then paring it down to the point of fun again. Question 8 was, how are you going to make finding a party hangar not a scrolling contest in an elevator when you're in a large party? So the answer to this was, it is going to be a scrolling contest, because essentially, if you are in a party, you will see all your party members' markers if they have their personal home in that location. So if I'm in a party of 5 and all those 5 party members all have their homes in Area 18 and I'm in Area 18, when I'm in a lift, I will see the button choices there for all of their hangars. There isn't a party limit in Star Citizen, and the sky is the limit. I don't actually know if there's an upwards limit. I think the upward limit might actually just be the server limit. But essentially, if you are in a server of 100 people, then there will be 100 separate buttons on the lift panel if they also happen to have their personal home in that one location. As the game evolves, of course, and there are more locations and things like that, you're going to have less of an issue even if you do have a monster party, but yes, it's still going to be one of those things. Jared then went on to add that in 323, there are only going to be 4 starting zones. So all that mentioned before about anywhere with a hangar is kind of for the future. So for the present and the near future, it's only going to be Area 18, New Babbage, Lorville, and also Orison. Question 9 was, is there an occupancy limit for the player personal hangars? So the answer is no. It's going to be the exact same rules as the rest of the verse. So if you want a monster party, you can have a monster party. Question 10 is, if a player is in their ship in their hangar and log out in their ship bed, where do they log back in? And has their ship been stored? So the answer here is that they will not be logging back into their hangar in 323 due to the complexity of instancing and shards. Essentially, networking is a bit of a funny thing here because there's so much going on. When you spawn in your personal hangar, when you request a ship, it actually takes a room that exists in-game and then phases in your hangar of that size there. So imagine this. If you're in Lorville and you want a ship, you call for the ship, and if there is a space available, then you'll be given a hangar. If not, you get put in the queue. What happens if you're the other way around and you're trying to log into the hangar in your ship? If there's no space, what happens to your character? So until they have all this ironed out, they're just going to go ahead and make it so that you just wake up in the hab instead. However, Chad did say that they wanted to revisit relogging in the hangars in particular, so this might just be a thing for now because again, Chad mentioned a while ago how bed logging and the future of is going to be very different from what we know of it right now. Question 11 was, can we equip weapons in personal hangars despite armistice zones? So I think the important part of the answer is that no, you won't be able to equip and use and shoot the gun. However, you will be able to carry it and still load weapon racks and stuff while being in a hangar. Chad did make mention again about how he doesn't want a scenario where people who aren't friendly find a way into your hangar and shoot. However, I don't see necessarily why they couldn't just make it so that in an armistice zone, you can use your weapon and you can shoot your weapon, but those people can't, aside from obviously immersion. Question 12 was, what does this mean for our OG flare items? How can we decorate our personal hangars? So apparently all the flare items that we've built up over the years are in a bit of a state, depending on when and who made them. A lot of these items were designed for the use of a specific system called the item port system from back in the day for decorating the old hangars. Some of them, however, are able to be carried about and used in the verse, and essentially what they've said here, there's a rule of thumb. If you can pull it out now, you can use it. And if you can't, then we're going to have to wait for the props team to essentially address the tech debt that's built up with these older systems. In this release, however, they will be adding furniture that you can buy at certain locations that you can use to decorate your hangar, so that's definitely a plus. Question 13 was, how does autoloading work in non-hangar locations? So this is a really big answer here. Essentially, autoloading will not work if that location does not have a hangar. If it's just a landing pad and you're in an open area, there will be certain features that will not be there that do exist in things like LEOs and larger throughput locations. The intention here is that smaller locations are going to be designed to work better with smaller ships with lesser stock and smaller boxes that only require manual loading, with the intent here to reward the right ship for the job. On the flip side, the LEOs and the DCs, the new distribution centers, are considered big routes that will support larger ships that deal with higher volumes of material with those particular systems for loading. The main goal here is that there'll be high, mid, and small volume locations, and each will have their own characteristics that you'll have to be prepared for. However, if you want to manually unload massive amounts of cargo at a large volume location with a big crew, you can, and potentially also be rewarded with more money as a result, because there is a cost in both time and money in waiting for an autoload to happen. Chad then went on to stress their team's philosophy. He says, "We want to encourage people to engage with manual loading. You can expect pricing and load times will be favorable for manual loading, and automatic will also be a viable path, but it may not be as profitable or even as time efficient as manual loading. In addition, we want pricing and loading to be intelligent based on volume of cargo. So the more cargo you have, the more time and money it may take to load. They also want to encourage making smart decisions. So you shouldn't show up and buy 701 SCU boxes and expect them to be the same price, the same money, and the same time to load as the same amount of cargo but in 32 SCU boxes, making price dependent on the number of boxes and the volume of cargo." The next question asks, is massive cargo still planned to affect the ship's performance? The answer was yes, however, they decided to not release it with 323 because as it stands, they don't have the tech yet to account for cargo that is not connected to a ship's grid. So without having a complete mechanic here for overloading, they decided that it wasn't worth releasing it halfway. Question 15 says, CIG made mention of adding anything to the grid, that is the cargo grid of a ship. What's that progress like? So Chad says that it's going well, but not as fast as they thought it was going to be, with a few hang-ups. The end goal is still the same, to be able to have you attach everything barring corpses to the cargo grids. However, in 323, vehicles and certain ship items will not be able to be attached to a cargo grid. However, you will still be able to have them loose, and this is due to certain issues on the vehicle side to do with physics considerations. However, with certain ship items, they're just not designed to be used in such a way that they can clip to a cargo grid. So unfortunately, we'll not be able to attach them onto things like a Hull A or Hull C's pads. However, ships with regular gravity storage will have no problem. 323 will be the first step in this process, however, as you will still be able to attach things like helmet boxes and chest piece boxes, or literally any other item you can carry with a tractor beam that's box-shaped, and attach these to your cargo grids. The next question goes, is there any future at all whatsoever for cargo decks beyond just buying tractor beams and empty containers? So Chad says that cargo decks were designed without the big picture of cargo delivery in mind, and didn't want to give a definitive answer as it's still not decided. But with things like the new distribution centers and what they're supposed to be doing for the game and for cargo and other kinds of gameplay as well, it's best to maybe just ignore them for now. The next question is, what happens if we bring contraband to personal hangars? Can we store them? So Chad says that for the moment, it'll work as usual. So if you find anything like the contraband items like the gasping weevil eggs or widow and things like that, you'll be able to store them in your personal hangar with no problem, I assume, provided you don't get scanned by security. However, he mentions that if you are taking on a hauling mission, which is a brand new mission type that we don't have yet, in these missions, you'll be given cargo and you have to take that cargo from A to B, and it's going to be a large sum of cargo. And they don't want players to just take the items and just forego the mission. So in these instances, if you take the cargo, let's say, away from the trade route, and if you have a cargo mission and you've taken it and you're supposed to go to Area 18, but you go to Microtech instead, You'll get a warning saying that you're going off course and you need to sell it in the right location, and if you proceed and you try and sell it at the wrong place, then it'll be marked as stolen and you'll get a fine when you try and sell it there because, hey, at the end of the day, it's bound to reputation and you're doing yourself more harm than good here. He did go on to mention, however, that if you try and sell it even at a no questions asked terminal, like let's say for instance Grim Hex, even Grim Hex will buy those items for much, much less as they're going to be considered as hot items. Because SC is this big sandbox game, they want to make sure that all playstyles are taken into account when it comes to even these missions. So for instance, when it comes down to pirates, they don't want to punish the pirate players for interdicting the wrong kind of hauler. They want to be able to allow the pirates to still be able to make something out of taking and stealing the items from these cargo missions. The next question is, will we be able to rename and recolor storage containers? So apparently it's planned, but again, not for this patch, and essentially they've been talking about perhaps allowing things like tinting the boxes, labeling them, and naming them just so that as a player you have an idea as what's going on in your ship, especially if you're in a larger ship with lots of crew and lots of items. I mean, currently we have things like scanning with the multi-tool, but it'd be nice to be able to also label boxes in more easy to understand ways. The next question is, how much SCU can the freight elevator hold, and are they the same capacity at all locations? So apparently there are 4 different sizes of freight elevator and they're tied to the different kinds of hangars you can get. So all in all, there are 4 sizes, so small, medium, large, and extra large. However, Chad didn't give us any specifics as to the volumes because he didn't have them at hand at the time. There was, however, emphasis on perhaps encouraging players to use the larger hangars, especially for doing things like pulling out vehicles and larger boxes when working with friends. The next question asks if the ship lift will be able to carry multiple vehicles at the same time. So again, not for this release. If you can move it off to the side, however, you'll still be able to chain pulling different ships. So if you have a small party and you want to pull up all your ships in one hangar, you can, provided there's enough space for it. The next question asks if there are any other locations besides hangars where ship lifts deliver vehicles. And the simple answer for this is not with 323. And then finally, Jared asks about fauna. He says, hypothetically, if I coerce a Copion aboard my ship and into my hangar and leave, will the Copion persist in my hangar for all time? And actually, Chad says, well, theoretically, yes, and some players have been able to do this already with just your standard fare NPC. You can actually push these NPCs into your ships, and as long as the ship persists, those players still persist as well, and since your personal hangar works very similarly to how persistence works on your ships, the answer is yes, which means that not only am I going to have a horde of Copions, but also every single other NPC in the game. Anyway, that's the Q&A. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please do make sure to like and subscribe. And yeah, leave a comment. If you leave more than 5 likes, then maybe perhaps I'll do this again. I enjoyed the format. And it's still a longer video, but it's still, you know, it's shorter than 1 hour and 20 minutes. Until next time, guys, thank you for watching and be good.